The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Game Podcast Network is brought to you by Nordic Fantasy. Sign the promo code SGPN to score up to $1,000 of bonus cash. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Get your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgame.com/RATHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Game Podcast Network. It is currently Wednesday morning, roughly 1:30 a.m. Eastern Time on August 28th. I'm Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Should be a pretty decently long episode because we're going through the second round of the U.S. Open. So we're going to preview some of the matches, not all of them, but we are going to break down some of the matches that are going to be in store for us to watch over the next couple days. Before we get to that, though, I want to remind you once again to like, subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. Also, a reminder that if you're still listening to the podcast audio only, that's fine. You can still listen to it on Spotify or Apple. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast, though, when you are listening to it. Definitely goes a long way. Plus, I believe we are now, I think it's 4 subscribers away from 500 on YouTube, so please help us get there. Should probably take a day or two. Point is, though, been a very nice amount of subscribers joining the pod over the last month or so. So thank you if you are one of them. And if you are not, then what are you waiting for? Hopefully you enjoy the content so far. Plus, a reminder, check out the SGPN merch store. We have a lot of great Tennis Gambling Podcast merch. We have shirts, sweatshirts, and mugs, all very affordable and all very comfortable. You're looking at also a great deal we have with SGPN because we have everything off the merch store for 10% off with promo code football. So I'd recommend getting yourself something Tennis Gambling Podcast related, a t-shirt. We have different colors as well. But once again, check out the merch store because we get 10% off everything with the code football. Plus, a reminder, the college football experience and the Sports Camp Podcast are giving out their week 1 college football picks. So hopefully you enjoy that as those games do start on Thursday. Time to get into the actual recap of the first round. Now, for the lock and dog picks, going to recap both episodes because we had an episode for the women's round and for the women's outrights and for the men's outrights. So starting off with the overall recap, overall not great. Now, we had a couple losses that were really, really heartbreaking. But we ended up having a win on Tuesday, so we didn't get reverse swept, which is good. Starting off with the women's episode. Ended up picking up a loss with Fresh money line at minus 150. I believe she had 2 break points in the 5-5 game in the second set and ended up choking it. She was up a break 2 in the first. Minin just converted all the break point chances she had. I believe she went 5 for 5 on break points. So Fetch just could not hold off a break point to save her life, and she ended up losing in straight sets. Was competitive, though, 7-5, 7-5, so kind of unfortunate there. Picked up a loss. For the dog, a really annoying loss. We had Bogdan and Roos over 2.5 sets at plus 135. That fell a bit short. I believe Roos was serving for the second set, and she choked it, and then eventually lost in, or I should say, I believe Bogdan was serving for the second set, and then she choked it, and then Roos ended up winning in a tiebreak in the second. So pretty annoying there for the sake of our women's picks, because we were 1 game away from getting there, and unfortunately, she led 30-15, didn't get there, picked up a loss. So either way, that was pretty unfortunate for the women's episode. As for the men's episode, another heartbreaker for the lock. We had the Djokovic in Zverev in straight sets parlay at minus 105. Djokovic got there because he was obviously going to beat Albert in straight sets. Zverev dominated 3 sets against Marter. The problem was they weren't 3 sets in a row. It was an embarrassing choke job by Zverev in that second set. He had a bunch of chances. I believe he had love 40 in the 4-4 game. He had 15-30 in the 5-5 game, and then he double faulted twice in the tiebreak. And he also, there was one pretty unfortunate, I'd say, spot he was put in, where it was very good overall serve that forced Marter off the court. The ball, though, that he tapped over, hit the net and bounced over, and it kind of messed up Zverev's timing, but he punted the forehand into the net. He also had a second serve return that he just launched out of play. Pretty much Zverev just gifted him the tiebreak, and I didn't feel like Marter did much to earn it. But Zverev just made a bunch of mistakes because he's Zverev, and he picked up a loss for us. However, on the bright side, did end up winning the dog for the men's episode, as we ended up having a 2-big parlay. We had Bergs Kotov over 3.5 sets parlayed with Medjedovic and Morozin over 3.5 sets, and that paid out at plus 129. Never in doubt. In fact, both matches overachieved. They both went to 5. You saw each player win one of the first 2 sets, so it was as sweat-free as it could be. A nice winner. And once again, thankfully, we didn't get reverse swept on both episodes. But all 3 losses that we had were somewhat close. The Fretch one, maybe not so much, but double break point to go up 6-5 in the second gives you a shot, and she was up a break in the first. So we had some opportunities. If only Bogdan held in the 5-4 game in the second set, she couldn't do it. And Zverev was a clown for about 20 minutes. So once again, pretty unfortunate for those 3. Still a nice win, though, to wrap up the first round. Now, to get into the actual recap for the event so far, I'm not going to cover every match for the men's and women's, but I am going to cover a couple matches in general. So starting off with the first day, you saw Baena win against Choinski in the first round in 5. Would have been a bad choke job as he was up a break in every single set, and he blew it in the third and fourth. So he won the first 2 sets, was up a break in the third, choked it, up a break in the fourth, choked it, and then he won in the fifth. So nice win by Baena to keep his composure after choking away the last 2 sets, and he eventually got the job done in 5. Besides that, you ended up seeing Zverev beat Martera in 4. You saw Shang beat Bublik in 5. Thought Shang was going to basically run out of gas, and he took a couple of medical timeouts in the match, but he got the job done. Shout out to Bublik, by the way, who ended up double faulting and then underarm serving on break point, which got him the game, or I should say the match losing break. So a nice job, Bublik. Never change, and you ended up going underhand serve on break point, and of course Shang hit a great return immediately, and you picked up a loss. So classic Bublik there. Mentally checked out after he won a title this year, and that's kind of what I have to say about Bublik. Nice win for Shang, though. Curious how his body's going to hold up, but nice win regardless. You saw Stricker lose to Komensanya in 4. Team officially retired from Grand Slams as he got destroyed by Shelton. I think he's going to retire in October. He's probably going to play one more event or a couple more, and then he's going to call it a day. But Team was really, really not close to doing anything in this match. I believe he never broke, and Shelton destroyed him. So not exactly the way you want to end your career for Team. Berrettini beat Ramos Vinolas. You saw Ruud win in straight sets. You saw Martinez end up outlasting Kaznikowski in 5 with a super breaker. Haven't had many super breakers so far in the event. Martinez, though, did win 10-6 in that one. Rublev won in straight sets. Fritz won in straight sets. Fuchsovic looked good early as he beat Leheshka 6-1 in the first set. Then he was getting destroyed, and of course, he got injured again. What else is new? And Fuchsovic ended up retiring. Musetti was tested by Opelka. Somehow dropped the set 6-1, but eventually he won in 4. You saw Nishioka have a scary injury as Kekmanovic ended up losing 2 of the first 3 sets. Then he won the 4th set 7-5, and then Nishioka collapsed, borderline heat stroke, and he had to retire. So pretty unfortunate. Hopefully he makes a full recovery, but it was pretty scary seeing him basically collapse on the floor by the baseline. Scary scene, but he ended up having to retire, and Kekmanovic got the job done in 4+ sets. You ended up seeing Monfils beat Schwartzman in 4. Props to Schwartzman, though, for making it through qualifying, and props to him for winning a set. Ran out of gas, though. Monfils killed him 6-2, 6-2, 6-1 in the final 3. So Schwartzman's going to retire as well. Solid career for him. He's going to retire officially next year, though. I think he wants to probably play Cordoba first, if I had to guess. Point is, though, final Grand Slam, or I should say final U.S. Open for him. And he put up a good effort. At least he made it through qualifying. Besides that, Shevchenko beat Kepfer in 4. Eubanks ended up losing in 5 to Rinderknecht. Pretty much the match I expected there. Just expecting a pretty competitive matchup that was probably going to go 4 or 5. Classic Eubanks, though. Ever since he made it to the quarters in Wimbledon, he has been absolutely terrible in Grand Slams. I think that quarterfinal appearance is an absolute fluke, by the way. I've said this before. I don't think Eubanks is actually a good tennis player, and I feel like the Wimbledon run gave him this, I don't want to say gave fans this sudden false expectation of what his career was going to be. He's not that good. Let's just put it that way. But either way, he ended up losing to Rinderknecht in a final set breaker. So lost in the first round there. Hijikata ended up beating Fokina. Fokina's had a disastrous year, and that continued as Hijikata got the job done in 4. You saw Rune get his ass kicked, lost to Nakashima, winning only 7 games. Baez ended up beating Darderi in 4. Tiafoe was on the verge of potentially collapsing again, but then he got the job done in 4. You saw Desir beat Struff in 5. Struff's had a pretty rough couple months. Kaza beat Busta. Props to Busta for making a deep run at Winston-Salem, but I think we all knew he was kind of out of gas, and Kaza killed him. You saw Djokovic win in straight sets as well. Now, as for the women's match that I want to talk about, I'll mention a couple. Sakari got injured. I mentioned that quickly. There was one match, though, that I have to talk about, which I feel like is well documented, but I am going to talk about it because I feel like it is just too funny not to mention. I want to dive into the realm of Sloane Stephens because I feel like that we kind of have to do this. So Stephens won the first set 6-0. Great. She's up 3-0 in the second set. She won the first 9 games of the match, and she lost outright. She served for the match twice, once in the second, once in the third. She ended up losing the match she lost the match 6-0, 5-7, 5-7. How the hell do you lose a tennis match 2 out of 3 sets when you win the first 9 games? Only Sloane Stephens. In hindsight, how the hell did she win a U.S. Open? But anyway, since her U.S. Open title in, I think, 2017, this is a perfect, I'd say, synopsis of her career. Just constant underachieving and winning a set via bagel and going up 3-0. And you're on one of the main courts, by the way. I think she was on Ash, and you, of course, are American. The entire crowd's behind you. You win the first 9 games, you serve for the match twice, and you lose. Ouch. That is probably the worst choke job of the entire first round. Gonna be tough to beat. That is really, really bad. Anyway, that's kind of the only thing I want to talk about for women's, at least for the recap for this. I wanted to mention it, though, in passing. I saw Sun got injured, too, which kind of sucks. She had a good run the week prior and eventually lost in the final. But the point is, she ran out of gas, she got injured, and that's unfortunate. But had to mention Sloane Stephens, because being up 6-0, 3-0, and losing in a 2-3 set match is incredible, and I had to mention it. Besides that, though, time to move on to what happened in the actual Wednesday matches. Going to spend less time going through this day. But the point is, you had Felix, who ended up getting destroyed in straight sets by Mensik. Navone won his first hardcourt match. Congratulations. You beat Altmaier in 4. You saw Daniel blow a 2-set lead against Schoolcat as he ended up winning in 5. You ended up seeing Hurkacz win in straight sets. Gofen beat Tabilo in straight sets. Good showing for Gofen. You saw Tsitsipas lose in 4 to Kokkinakis. Said I was not exactly surprised that Kokkinakis pulled off the upset, and he did, as he ended up winning 7-5 in the 4th. Besides that, you saw Evans beat Khachanov in the longest U.S. Open match in the history of the event. I believe it took 5 hours and 35 minutes. Congrats to Evans. I believe Khachanov now is 0-5 lifetime against Evans. I think he's 0-5 lifetime. Yes, he's 0-5. So Khachanov can't beat this guy. He's been in bad form. Props to Evans, though. He's had a really rough year, and he was able to show up to win a 5.5-hour marathon. Good for him. You saw Zhang end up retiring as he got destroyed in the final set and a half. Besides that, you saw Coric losing straight sets to Manarino. That's fun. Manarino hadn't won since June. He'd lost 10 straight matches. Congrats, Coric. I recognize that you were being an absolute clown against Ichikata, and that carried over into this match. Straight sets to Manarino. Damn, that's rough. But that was an abysmal showing by Coric. You ended up seeing Sinner lose the first set to McDonald. Then he dominated in the final 3 sets. You saw de Minaur win in 4 against Giron. You saw Medvedev beat Lajovic in 4. Shapo and Dzanchop, the head case Super Bowl of the event, ended up going in favor of Dzanchop, as Shapo no-showed and he lost in straight sets. You saw Morozin beat Medvedev in 5. Kaboli beat Duckworth in 4. You saw Bergs beat Kotov in a final set breaker. Jari continues to suck. O'Connell beat him in 4. Wawrinka lost. Not sure if that's going to be his final U.S. Open. Lost in straight sets to Bellucci. Bellucci pretty underrated in general. Alcaraz did lose a set to Lee 2. Ended up getting the job done, though, in 4. And Paul beat Sonego in 4. Sonego, friend of the podcast, though, did still cash 29-1 shot, but I think he was out of gas, as Paul did beat him in 4 sets. Nothing else to really add. Trying to think of any women's matches worth talking about. Nothing too shocking. You saw Fernandez, one of our picks to win the quarter, lost in the first round in 3. Kind of a choke job there. You saw Rogers retire as she ended up losing to Pegula. Collins lost as she also ended up retiring as she lost in 3. And you ended up seeing Andreescu lose to Paolini. Also, you ended up seeing Raducanu, who lost to Kenin. Fernandez and Raducanu, in hindsight, how the hell did they make it to a U.S. Open final? And how did Raducanu win a title? Because I have no idea how that even happened. Both players have not been good lately, and that continued in the first round. Anyway, that's about 14 minutes of recap, so now it's time to get into the actual preview for the second round. But for that, remember, once again, we're brought to you by Nordic Fantasy, because they have a pick'em, which gives you a chance to win 1,000 times your entry, or you can play fantasy football the right way with Best Ball. Best Mania is now live with $15 million in prizes. You can have specials and boosts on all flex entries. I'll probably do something with WNBA. I'll go with Alyssa Thomas, higher 17.5 rebounds and assists for my Nordic entry for Wednesday. Sign the promo code SGPN to claim your special pick and a first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 bonus cash on Nordic Fantasy. Promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping what happened in the first round. Now it's time to get into the second round. A reminder, we are not going to cover every match. We're going to cover a decent amount of them. However, we are missing some lines for the matches on Thursday, so we're going to have to at least acknowledge that, but it is what it is. Starting off, I'm not going to cover every match, but going into the first match that we are going to talk about, we're going to look at a matchup between, we'll go with Dimitrov and Ichikata, actually. So this might sound a bit familiar, because they actually faced off a couple weeks ago in Montreal. and Dimitrov did beat Hijikata 6-1, 6-0. So the point is, it was very lopsided. Dimitrov won in straight sets. A pretty convincing win there. Hijikata ended up beating Fokina in 4 in the first round. For the actual prices, though, Dimitrov, of course, a massive favorite as he's around minus 1,000. Hijikata is plus 700. For the actual game spread, minus 7.5 for Dimitrov, plus 7.5 for Hijikata. The over-under games is 31.5. For the set wagering, Dimitrov in straight sets is minus 130. Hijikata to win a set is even money. And for the over 4.5 sets, you can find that at plus 425. You can find the over 3.5 sets at plus 110. So even though Dimitrov is kind of my nemesis and I really can never win a bet on him, I thought about using it as the lock, but I can't do it. I reminded everybody that if I ended up backing Dimitrov again, you had the right to punch me. I can't do it. He is bad for my actual bankroll at this point. I just can't back the guy. He always seems to screw me. Same with Zverev, but it is what it is. Point is, though, for this matchup, I do think it's a pretty good matchup for Dimitrov, and the fact that he did win the last match, losing a total of 1 game, I think definitely bodes well for him. They also faced off in Brisbane earlier this year, and Dimitrov won 6-1, 6-4. So you'll probably say Hijikata put up more of a fight than 6-1, 6-0, but Hijikata did face off against Fokina, who's been a mess. Dimitrov, though, with the exception of the match that he ended up choking against Papirin and the match against Morozin in Cincinnati, he has been good this year, and I do think that Hijikata, despite being in pretty decent form recently, is still not really, I'd say, dangerous just based on the lack of weapons that he has. And I just feel like Dimitrov will be able to dictate the points using his variety, using his better serve. Hijikata is not a great server, and I do think Dimitrov will be all over it. So I am going to go with Dimitrov in straight sets here at about plus, I should say minus 130. I just think Dimitrov's the better player by a wide margin, and I do think that the matchup in Montreal and in Brisbane this year suggests what I think we already know, which is Dimitrov should win this match comfortably and advance into the third round. Moving on to the next match, we're going to look at a matchup between, you know what, we'll go with Baez and Griekspoor. This matchup actually should be pretty fun. So for this one, you have Griekspoor, who is around minus 200. Baez is about plus 180. For the game spread, minus 3.5 for Griekspoor, plus 3.5 for Baez. The over-under in games is 39.5. For the actual set wagering here, you have Baez plus 1.5 sets at minus 135. Griekspoor minus 1.5 sets at plus 105. The over 3.5 sets is minus 205. The over 4.5 sets is plus 200. Now, in the head-to-head, they are tied 1-1. Both meetings, though, were on clay, and they're both dated. They faced off in Slovakia in 2021. Griekspoor won in straight sets. Faced off in Rome in 2022, and Baez won in 3. So nothing really to go on based on head-to-head because they're both on clay, and they're both basically 2 years dated. However, I saw Griekspoor look good in the first round against Nagal. I faded into Nagal, and I ended up backing Coric personally in the Winston-Salem event. So I was not high on Nagal's form. Not a great hardcore player, as far as I'm concerned. Really no weapons, and Griekspoor won comfortably. Baez ended up winning in 4 against Darderi. Darderi can be a bit dangerous. At least I think he's underrated, but the point is he ended up winning that one in 4. I think for this one, I'm going to lean to the dog. I see a very competitive matchup. I think this is probably going 4 or 5. I'd be shocked if either guy won in straight sets. I just see at some point one guy having a solid set and then falling apart a set later. So I see a marathon here. I don't mind the over for the sake of the actual sets. 4.5, honestly, might get there. You might end up going 5. It wouldn't shock me. I am going to link to Baez, though. I just think if I'm expecting the match to be a marathon, why would I lay minus 200? I just don't see much value on that. I think Baez has the game. I know he's not the best hardcourt player. He's fine on hardcourt, but Griekspoor has been kind of all over the place since the first couple months of the season. And I feel like ever since he ended up choking away that 5th set against Zverev in the French Open, he really just has not been able to get his season back under control. And based on that, I really don't like what I've seen. Baez has not been great recently either, but I do think that based on the overall form of both guys, maybe being a little bit, I'd say, questionable, I think minus 200 or minus 210 in this case is a bit steep. So I am going to go with the dog here at plus 180. I think it's a close matchup, though. I think it should go the distance. So maybe if you want to go for Baez to win and both players to win a set, or maybe you want Griekspoor to win, and you want Griekspoor to win and both players to win a set, you can definitely cut into that juice. But there's no way I'm laying minus 210 in this matchup. Moving on to the next match that I'm going to talk about, matchup between, where do we want to go for this one? For this one, we'll go to Shevchenko against Tiafoe. So Tiafoe is a massive favorite. Tiafoe is around minus 600. You have Shevchenko at about plus 460. For the game spread here, you have Tiafoe minus 6.5. You have Shevchenko plus 6.5. For the over-under in games, you have 35.5. For the actual set spread here, Tiafoe minus 2.5 sets is plus 115. Shevchenko plus 2.5 sets is minus 145. The over 3.5 sets is minus 125. The over 4.5 sets is plus 325. Now, Tiafoe did win in 4 against Kovacevic. It looked like he was going to coast, and then it kind of unraveled in the third set. Bit of the fourth set as well. I had to fight off some break points. He did, but he eventually won in 4. As for Shevchenko, he was in really, really bad form, and then he was able to win the first round against Kempfer, who is not really a great hardcourt player, can be dangerous on occasion. A point though, Shevchenko did win that one in 4. I believe he was serving for the match in the third. He choked it, and then eventually he ended up winning in 4. So for this one, Tiafoe's a massive favorite. I'm not laying 600, obviously. The question is, do I want the games? Not really. I think Tiafoe could, in theory, go to a breaker or two, and we know that Tiafoe can occasionally have some overall mental lapses in his game. However, Shevchenko's form has been so bad, and Tiafoe's form has actually been improved over the last couple months. I might not actually mind the minus 2.5 sets at plus 115. Might just be a price play. I think Tiafoe looked very sharp for the first 2 sets, and then Kovacevic kind of got going with a one-handed backhand. I'm looking at Shevchenko, though, who looked good in the first round, but I kind of need a bigger sample size. That might just be a one-off. He's been a mess for months. So I think I'm going to lean Tiafoe. I think if he ends up avoiding the mental lapse, which is asking a lot, I think if he ends up avoiding a mental lapse, he should win in straight sets, and it's plus money. I don't mind it. I think Tiafoe's the better server. Shevchenko really has been a mess for most of the year, which is a shame because I liked him. We actually backed him a couple times in the first couple months of the year, and he ended up cashing some bets for us. But I do think that he is kind of trying to find himself again, and I do think that Tiafoe just has too much firepower. I don't want to compare it exactly to the Dimitrov and Hijikata match, but the argument of how the points will be constructed is kind of the same. Tiafoe's got a lot of firepower. Shevchenko's going to try to run around the court and keep the ball in play. And I just think Tiafoe is going to be a little bit too aggressive for, I'd say, a really competitive matchup here. I think Shevchenko's going to run into some problems. I think he's going to have a hard time serving, and I do think that Tiafoe will get the job done. Straight sets, though, I think it's a pretty good deal at plus 115. That'll be my value play for that match. Moving on to the next match. Matchup between, where do we want to go with this one? I'll go with Shelton and Agut for this one. So Shelton is a massive favorite, as Shelton is around, what is his money line price? He is about minus 500. Agut's about plus 395. Game spread minus 5.5 for Shelton, plus 5.5 for Agut. For the actual set spread here, Agut plus 2.5 sets is minus 180. You have Shelton minus 2.5 sets at plus 150. The over 3.5 sets is minus 150, and the over 4.5 sets is plus 265. Now, it's actually the second meeting in Grand Slams this year, and both of them are on hard court because they faced off in the Australian Open earlier this year, and Shelton did win in straight sets. Was competitive, though, the sets, 6-2, 7-6, 7-5. We saw him win in straight sets against Team as he destroyed him. Team, though, has been washed for years, so not the most impressive win, but he did what he had to do. He won comfortably. Agut won in straight sets against Nardi, but it was not easy. In fact, it was 7-5, 7-6, 7-6. Now, I know Nardi was able to beat Djokovic on hard court earlier this year. I think Nardi's horrible, and I don't really think that's an impressive win either. In fact, I thought Agut would win more comfortably. And I know Agut is past his prime, but I do think that he still has a lot of game left on hard court. The issue is his overall recovery and his durability with his overall stamina. The point is, I don't think Nardi's any good. And Agut really, really struggled against him, which is not a good sign. But I do think that Shelton is always vulnerable to get broken at least once in a match. Maybe not in the first round because Team is completely washed. I think Agut's going to break him at least one time, probably a couple times if I had to guess. I think for this one, I am going to lean to the over 3.5 sets. If you want to go on Caesars, though, Caesars does have one of my favorite prop markets, which is player to win and both players to win a set. I'm not picking Agut to actually win the match. I think Shelton is just a little bit too solid right now, and I think that his serve will be too much for Agut to handle. But I do think Shelton can win the match while dropping a set. I think Agut will win something. Once again, the matchup in Australia, he ended up going to a 7-5 and a 7-6. So it wasn't like Shelton blew him out in 2 of the sets. He was just on the right side of it. So I think that you're looking at Agut maybe getting the job done. I don't want to lay 500, though. I don't trust Shelton enough to win in straight sets. Plus 150 is not bad. But I think for this one, I'm going to go with another plus money play. Unfortunately, Caesars is doing maintenance right now, so I can't give you an exact price. But Shelton to win and both players to win a set should be plus money. I don't mind that. Give me that as my main opinion for that match. Moving on to the next matchup. Going to have to jump around, though, because we have matches for Thursday they also have to cover. So going into the next matchup, you have Rude against Monfils. Now, this should be a fun one. Monfils been in better form recently. We saw him beat Alcaraz a couple weeks ago. As for the matchup, though, you have Rude as a favorite, obviously, as he's around minus 200. Monfils around plus 170. For the over-under, you have 38.5 for the game spread, minus 3.5 for Rude, plus 3.5 for Monfils. For the set spread here, Rude minus 2.5 sets is plus 290. Monfils, once again, plus 2.5 sets is minus 380. Monfils minus 1.5 set. Monfils plus 1.5 sets is a minus 135. Rude minus 1.5 sets is plus 105. The over 3.5 sets is minus 195. The over 4.5 sets is plus 220. Now, Monfils did look good in the final 3 sets against Schwartzman. And you're looking at Rude, who kind of struggled early. I think he went down to media break against Buh in the first round, and then he came back and he won straight sets. So both guys look pretty good in the first round. However, the head-to-head meetings have definitely showcased that these guys are pretty even because they faced off in Indian Wells this year, and Rude did win in 3. In fact, he came back from a set down. Faced off on clay, though, about 6 years ago, and Monfils won in 3. So I'll use the Indian Wells one for a reference point. Monfils still looked good, and I do think that he has kind of lifted his form. He was really struggling in the last couple months, but then he picked himself up again, and we saw him beat Alcaraz. We saw him lose to Rune in 3, beat Papiron, though. He kind of regained his form a bit, and I do think that he has the ability to make life difficult for Rude. We know that Rude is pretty one-dimensional is not the right word, but he's very stubborn, and he tends to try to do the same thing over and over again. And Monfils, I do think, will be able to extract unforced errors from Rude's overall baseline shots. And I do think with that being the case, Monfils should win a set at least. Do I think he can win? Yes. Am I picking Monfils to win? No. I think Rude wins. This might go 5. This would not shock me if it turned out to be a marathon and Monfils ran out of gas down the stretch. For this one, though, I think I am going to go back to my opinion for the Shelton match. Give me Rude to win, but both players to win a set, and you can probably get that at plus money. Point is, though, I think it's probably going to go 4, maybe 5. I think a marathon could definitely be in place, and we know Rude is very capable of punting sets. Same with Monfils. So I think that you're looking at both guys winning a set, and I do think that Rude can get the job done in what should be a war. So I'll go with Rude, but there's no way I'm laying minus 200. Give me Rude and both players to win a set at a pretty good price in the plus money range. Moving on to the next matchup, you have arguably match of the day, at least on paper for Wednesday. You have Berrettini taking on Fritz. Now, Fritz is a decent favorite. Fritz is about a minus 220. For the money line on Berrettini, plus 190. For the game spread, minus 3.5 for Fritz. You have plus 3.5 for Berrettini. For the over-under 41.5 games. For the sets, over 3.5 sets is minus 210. Over 4.5 sets is plus 210. Fritz minus 1.5 sets is minus 130. Berrettini plus 1.5 sets is even money. Now, for that dead meetings, Fritz is actually up 3-0. Faced off in the United Cup this year. Last year, sorry. And you ended up seeing Fritz win 7-6, 7-6. Face off in Indian Wells, Fritz won in straight sets. And they faced off in the Davis Cup in 2019. Fritz ended up winning in 3. Now, Fritz was not great early in his match against Ugo Carabelli, but eventually he got the job done 7-5. Then he coasted, dropping 3 games in the final 2 sets combined. Berrettini, kind of the same boat, went to a breaker against Ramos Vinolas in the first set. Then he dominated, won the second set 6-2, third set 6-3. Now, Berrettini has not played many matches on hard court. He played against Rune, lost in 3 in Cincinnati, and he played this match against Ramos Vinolas in the first round. That's it. We saw him dominate on clay, winning back-to-back clay titles, not dropping a set, and now he made the transition over to hard court. Fritz has been fine. Like, he hasn't been great. Lost to Korda in straight sets in Montreal, then lost to Nakashima in the first round of Cincinnati in 3. Then he beat a clay specialist in the first round. So, tough to really react to the straight set wins by both guys because they were against clay specialists. And I do think that even though Fritz is up 3-0, I think Berrettini is going to leave here with something. I think he's winning at least a set, probably a breaker in there. I don't mind the over in this match. I think that you're looking at what should be a competitive battle. Now, Fritz, I said pre-tournament, I was kind of interested in fading because I wasn't a fan of his form right now. Berrettini's dangerous, and I do think Berrettini, if he's able to keep his overall fitness under control and if he's able to serve well, he can win this. Like, I don't think it's that much of a hot take that Berrettini could beat Fritz if things kind of go his way. We know Berrettini, his upside is tremendous. He was a former top 10 guy, and I do think that he has the ability to pull off the upset here. Now, is he going to? 3-0 Fritz does make it a little bit, I'd say, tricky for me to fully pull the trigger on Berrettini, but I do think it's going to be a very close matchup. I like the over in games here. You might get a breaker, maybe 2, but I see a potential competitive war. And I think for that reason, I am going to go with the over. Don't know what the tiebreak price is, but I think you're probably getting at least one of them. So give me the over in that one. I'll avoid the actual like money line and sides. Just give me the total. I think you're going to see a very close matchup that should feature a ton of holds. Moving on to the actual Thursday slate. A reminder, we are missing a bunch of lines on Thursday, so that's kind of why I spend more time focused on the Wednesday matches. Now, for the first one, we're going to talk about Arnaldi and Safulin. You're looking at Arnaldi being about minus 200. Safulin at about plus 163. Safulin had basically a gift draw in the first round as he beat Forbes in straight sets. Not the easiest win, though, for the first couple sets. Meanwhile, you saw Arnaldi, who ended up beating Svaja, only dropping 6 games in the process. So both guys look pretty good in the first round. Arnaldi, I do think, is better, but Safulin's been good lately. I know he screwed me over in Indian Wells, dropping the final set breaker to Eubanks, but he's still a good hardcourt player. We know Arnaldi does tend to drop sets, and I do think Svaja is not that great. Yes, he beat Cerundolo in hardcourt a couple weeks ago, but he's really kind of a tweener between challengers and the pro level. I don't think he's that great, and I think Arnaldi is the better player just based on overall talent. Safulin, it should be a fun matchup. They faced off earlier in their careers, faced off this year in Brisbane, and Safulin ended up beating Arnaldi in straight sets. There was a breaker in there. It was 7-6, 6-2. It was also in January, so it is pretty dated. But I like the over in this one. I think Safulin wins at least one set. I think Arnaldi wins at least one set. You probably get a competitive battle here. But we know Arnaldi, and we've been a fan of Arnaldi on the show because we constantly take his overs, and they usually get there. So I don't mind the over 3.5 sets, kind of the same boat. Pick whoever you want to win. Take them parlayed with the over 3.5 sets and enjoy the extra payment if you end up getting it right. I don't see either guy winning in straight sets. Give me a close battle there. Moving on to the next matchup. For this one, trying to see which lineups actually have lines available. So for this one, we got Goffin taking on Mannarino in a bit of a throwback matchup between two veterans. So Goffin's minus 200. Mannarino is plus 163. Mannarino finally won a match in first time in a couple months as he ended up beating Chorich in straight sets. Goffin, though, beat Tabilo in straight sets. Tabilo has not been in great form, but he did beat Tiafoe a couple weeks ago, so we know the talent is there. And Goffin was able to win. Made a pretty respectable run in Winston-Salem as well before Sunigo killed them. So point is, I like the form Goffin's in. For this one, head-to-head, by the way, is 5-3 in favor of Goffin. Mannarino has won the last 2 meetings, but none of the meetings were within the last 2 years. Last meeting was in Astana back in 2022. So the meetings are a bit dated. For this one, give me Goffin minus 1.5 sets. I just feel like even though Mannarino won a match, I'm not going to suddenly tell you that he's back. Chorich, I think, is an absolute clown, and I kind of regret putting faith in him for the sake of Winston-Salem once I saw him choke to Hijikata. But we know that he's been all out of sorts since winning that 1,000 title in Cincinnati a couple years ago. Point is, Mannarino kept the ball in play, let Chorich self-destruct, and that was really the entire recipe for success. Goffin won't do that. Goffin will be willing to go down in long rallies with Mannarino. And Mannarino, we know, has been, of course, struggling with his overall form. So I like Goffin in this one. Might go 4, maybe straight sets, but Mannarino is still 1-10 in his last 11. I'm not going to suddenly tell you that he's back and he's dangerous because he won one match. If he wins this one, then I'll reconsider. But I think Goffin's better form, and I do think that this price is kind of cheap at minus 200. So give me Goffin minus 1.5 sets as my main thought for that matchup. Moving on to the next match. Which one do we want to go to? The next matchup we're going to talk about, you know what? We'll go to Thompson against Hurkacz to wrap up the card. So for this one, you have Hurkacz being about minus 227. Thompson's about plus 175. For the actual spread, you plus 4 for Thompson, minus 4 for Hurkacz. The over-under in games is 39. For the actual sets here, the over 3.5 sets is minus 180. The under is plus 145. For the set spread here, you minus 1.5 for Hurkacz, plus 1.5 for Thompson. The over 4.5 sets is plus 220. Now, both guys won their first round matches in straight sets. Hurkacz ended up going to 2 tie breaks against Skatov, and he ended up winning in 3. As for Thompson, he won very comfortably against Lestien as he only dropped 6 games. Now, no head-to-head meetings. Hurkacz, though, kind of concerns me because Skatov is not known for being a hardcore player. They went to a couple breakers, but Hurkacz had some injuries. He ended up getting injured in Cincinnati, ended up quitting against Tiafoe. So I don't really like the current overall form that Hurkacz is in, and he has dropped a lot of sets. So prior to that match in the first round against Skatov, he had dropped at least one set in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 straight matches. He's dropped at least one set. I don't really trust him at this price. Now, I know that he is better in terms of talent and upside than Thompson. Thompson's had a good year. Like, I'm not going to tell you that Hurkacz is worthy of being minus 220 when I question his durability and the fact that he went to 2 breakers against a relatively unknown player in the first round doesn't exactly instill much confidence, at least on my behalf, for him. So I'm going to like the Thompson, actually. I think Thompson has the game that can really frustrate Hurkacz. We know he can serve, we know he can volley, and we do know that he has been in pretty good form for the last couple of months, or at least he was. Point is, though, he won comfortably against Lestien, who's not a good hardcore player, but still a win's a win. He won comfortably. I think Thompson can definitely push this to 4 or 5. For value, give me Thompson. I think Thompson's got a shot to win the thing. Plus 190. I think it's a good deal. A reminder, though, try to take this bet on a book that actually grades retirements, because if Hurkacz gets injured and he ends up quitting, it would not shock me that it would not be too surprising to me. So keep that in mind. But I think Thompson can definitely pull off the upset if he ends up playing a solid, let's just say, not even fully A level. If he plays B plus level tennis, I think he can win the match. So I think that you're looking at a possibility of him getting the job done at a decent plus money price. Anyway, time to get into the lock and dog picks for the second round. But before we get to that, remember, once again, they're brought to you by Rhythm, because you can build your own betting model for football, or you could also use Rhythm's models that are already made for you, because they have their own predictive models in seconds that you can get predictions on money lines, spreads, total, and props for ton of sports, by the way, not just football. They also have WNBA and golf. You can build your own model or use one of Rhythm's. A reminder, though, they give you a bunch of stats, research, and trend analysis. They give you even more betting insights. And their football model, I love Delaware State over the weekend, plus the points against Hawaii. I think they were getting 40, and they were actually tied in the third quarter. Did lose, but covered. Build your own model and get ready for week 1 college football. A reminder, you can also get a 7-day free trial by using the link, sportscampodcast.com's room, sportscamp.com. That's RATHMM. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished going through the preview of the second round for the U.S. Open. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. For the lock and dog, I purposefully skipped a couple matches that I was going to go back to for the sake of this segment. For this one, I am going to go to a prop, and it's going to be pretty annoying, potentially, because this might be a marathon match. I still like it, though. I'm going to go to the Cerundolo and Etcheverry match, and I am going to go with the under half a tiebreak at plus 108 on Bet Rivers. Covering why I'm going to go with the under half a breaker. First reason, Cerundolo is not going to a tiebreak in 4 straight matches, and Etcheverry is not going to a tiebreak in 2 straight matches. Main reason, though, is based on the head-to-head. Now, all the meetings were on clay, I'll admit it, but they have 6 career meetings in the hard court. They have had a grand total of 0 tiebreaks in the 6 head-to-head meetings. If you want to break it down by sets, this is actually kind of crazy. They have 14 career head-to-head sets. 0 of those 14 sets had more than 9 games. Every set in the head-to-head, all 14, ended 6-3, 6-2, 6-1, or 6-0. 0 sets that even reached 6-4. And I can get under half a tiebreak at plus 108. Now, I understand it's on hard court. The other head-to-head meetings were on clay. Both guys, though, not the greatest at serving, so I don't exactly see either guy holding 6 times in a row. I think if you get a breaker, you're going to have a couple breaks, and it's going to balance out, which is unfortunate. But plus 108, I do like the price on. When you have 6 career meetings, no tie breaks, 14 career sets, none of them with 10-plus games, and I can get under half a tiebreak at plus 108. I like the deal with plus money, so I'll take that as my lock. I do think it might go 4 or 5, but both guys really can't serve. We know Cerundolo is guaranteed to punt at least 1 set. So the point is, I think you're looking at what should be a decent amount of 6-2s and 6-3s. Maybe like what we saw with Medjedovic and with Morozin, where you just have like alternating 6-1s and it kind of balances out. But I think that the plus 108 price is pretty good, so I am going to go with that as my lock. For my dog, I am going to go with a riskier play, but it is plus money, and it is definitely based on injury. So make sure you bet this on a book that grades retirements. I'm going to go with Baena on the money line against Shang at plus 215. Now, I know that Shang's the better hardcourt player. I know that he is a very talented player. However, he's been getting injured recently. We saw him get injured in Atlanta in his matchup against Thompson. We saw him take a couple of medical timeouts against Bublik as he won in 5 sets in the first round. We saw him retire in Winston-Salem. Point is, I don't trust his overall health, and the fact is he just won 5 sets. So Shang, we know, has been willing to drop out of matches, and I do think that Shang, even though he beat Bublik, if this match goes long, which I think it might end up going to 4 or 5, I have serious questions about the overall fitness level of Shang. And I think that Baena is a good price here at plus 215. Price is a lot higher, though, and the price has kind of dipped by a decent margin because people have been jumping on the idea that Shang physically should not be laying a big number, and I agree with it. So I'm going to back that angle. I think that Shang might end up dropping out if things go poorly for him early. But we know Baena, as a clay court specialist, is very, very willing to have long rallies, and we know that he can make the matches very physical, which is the exact opposite of what you want if you're Shang. So I think that Shang eventually will be in some trouble. And I question if he'll be able to fully get through the match physically. But plus 215, fading out with injury history, you end up going to 5 sets in the first round. I think it's a great opportunity for Baena. And a reminder that Baena did go 5 in the first round as well. However, his match was definitely, let's just say, long, but it was not, I'd say, following the initial script, because Baena was on pace to win in straight sets and in 4 sets, and he choked it away both times. So Baena won in 5. He was up a break, though, in the 3rd set and the 4th set, choked away both. So he could have easily beaten Choinsky in, basically 2 hours, and instead he ended up kind of messing around, and he ended up losing 2 sets. Got the job done, though, in 5. Point is, though, Baena has proven time and time again he's a solid clay player, but the main reason why he's extremely consistent, and he keeps the ball in play. And Shane can do the same thing, but when you have a guy with an injury history, and there's going to be a lot of long rallies, 30-plus shot rallies, and you're playing the Heat outside in the U.S. Open, it is a really rough matchup for Shang based on the conditions and his overall fitness, off a 5-setter as well. I like the price quite a bit here. I think 215 is a good price, so I am going to go with that as my dog. So once again, my picks for the second round. The log's going to be a plus money play. I'm going to go with Cerundolo and Echeverry under, half a tie break at plus 108, and my dog is going to be on Baena, money line against Shang at plus 215. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. Reminder back once again for the 3rd round of the U.S. Open in a couple days. Until then, you can find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. You can find me on the NBA show, WNBA show, the MLB show as well. A reminder, by the way, before I officially forget, a reminder to check out the merch store, and a reminder as well to like, subscribe on YouTube, and a reminder to rate over the podcast on Spotify or Apple. Till next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.